give yourselves a massive round of applause for making it this second series of the Agile Question Time event. The gentleman on my left and to your right is Luca. Luca is the Regional Chair of the Project Management Institute's London chapter. Feel free to reach out to Luca if you're interested, or the activities that Project Management Institute does within the London region. I'm sure he'll share some good things with you guys as well. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to our David Dimbleby for this evening, who's also known as Ian Hexter. Please give a round of applause to Ian Hexter, who's the chair for this evening.
We'll try and make this as interactive as possible, and certainly if you'd like to contribute, then raise your hands, and we'll try and get some thoughts and opinions from the wealth of experience we've no doubt got in the room, as well as on the panel as well today. I'd like to introduce you to the panel, and we'll start up on my right-hand side. So we have Rob Moores. Rob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Rob. I work for Google. I've got two teams that I'm responsible for, so I'm a program manager for those two teams. I've only really ever known Agile, to be honest, since I became a project manager sort of 12 years ago. So I sort of went back and did Waterfall, but yeah, I've seen many incarnations of Agile and learnt a lot. So yeah.
Excellent. And moving on to Lana Yatsyuk.
Yeah, hello guys, my name is Lana. I'm Agile Delivery Manager. I'm working for a company called Secret Escapes, and we inspire world to escape. So for the moment I'm having like hybrid role. This is like a Scrum Master role plus project management role, which is and my main purpose of my role is to help team to get stuff out of the door.
Okay, we can. Okay, is that loud and clear? Okay, fantastic. To my right, we have Lee Dunn.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lee Dunn. I work for HSBC. I'm the head of change for the retail bank and wealth management function in the UK. I've been doing this role for about just over a year now. Previous to that role, I was the CIO for the retail bank in the UK. So I have an 18-year background in IT, doing Agile, but also the more traditional formats of delivering change.
Okay, thank you, Lee. To my left, I have Philippe Duban.
Hi, good evening. I'm head of transformation for the retail bank in HSBC. So driving the agenda to make a more customer-oriented, more customer-focused organization to serve the needs of all our customers.
Excellent. And last but not least, we've got Anna Novikova.
Hello, I'm independent Agile coach, Agile transformation coach. I've been working in e-commerce, structures and finance as well, so banking. At the moment, I work for a non-IT function as a consultancy, which is like wealth of new experience for me. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, and finally, just to introduce myself, my name is Ian Hexter. I'm a global delivery director in RBWM Business Transformation, so I sit within Philippe's team. I have a few responsibilities, to be fair to say. I look after all things customer journey related, which is a sort of a pivot in focus for us in the organisation. And I'm also responsible for business agility. I think that's right, isn't it? In the organisation, I've known Lee for years. Lee and I worked in IT for quite a long time, so I've been around for 26 years this year. So I'm a bit of a dinosaur, and not your typical agile person, I would say. So we've got a wealth of experience on the panel today. But without further ado, I'm going to open the floor up to the first question.
Jeff's question is, if you had to distill Agile into a single principle, what would that principle be?
This is the question. If you ask it to anyone in Agile industry, each person will have different answer to this, no matter who you're talking with. I thought about my answer. I've asked about a couple of other Agile coaches what they think. And then last night I thought I'll ask someone who actually was at the beginning of Agile Manifesto, one of the forefathers of Agile Manifesto. I just felt very brave for some reason. So I've written the chap called Ari von Bennekom, and he's replied. And he said, in his idea, that should be, actually he said just 2 words, he said, avoid delay. It's like, okay, but how would you do that? Get early feedback. So this is a bit of an answer from someone who was at the beginning of Agile Manifesto, but my answer would be ruthless on value, but be gentle on people. That would be, yeah.
Excellent, thanks. Lana, do you have a perspective from your experiences?
So yeah, if I need to select one principle, I would go with transparency. And what I mean by transparency, in this case, I mean 2 aspects. It's like visibility and shared understanding. Because in the modern business environment, projects are not isolated incidents, and it involves lots of disciplines, lots of people, lots of resources, lots of everything. And I would say that all information needed for project success needs to be available, communication needs to be flowing, and what I would say is that the shared understanding should be, for example, if you're delivering something, what does it mean done? What does it mean ready? What does it mean, what outcome we need to achieve? So I would say that.
I think for me it's less about the sort of the theory that you read in the Scrum manuals and things like that. It's more about communicating the sort of goal of a project and then breaking that down into a series of kind of deliverables that everyone can work towards, and everyone across the business. I think too often we read a book, we do Scrum training or whatever, and then we go straight into sprints. And I've realised that that's not the way forward. It's more about getting the people together, creating that kind of shared goal, and removing blockers. That's not one principle, is it? But that's somewhere in there. There's a principle, and I think it's not the theory.
For me, it's about the collaboration, but also having the mindset change, or the mindset to be collaborative. For similar reasons to what Robert said, is you can't do this in isolation. You need to be joined up end to end with all parties, and everybody has to understand what we're trying to achieve. So you're all trying to aim for the same goal. But I really like the ruthless on value, because I think that is lost sometimes, trying to achieve the aim.
For me, it's create more value for our customers, for our colleagues, quicker through small batches. That's there's much more to that, but that's the summary for me.
Excellent. And I would echo, lots of what has been sort of said by the panelists, but to me, it's about responding to customers' needs. That's purely what it's down to, because we're here to serve customers ultimately, and having that relentless focus around our customers' own needs. That's, to me, is what Agile should really be about. Okay, excellent. That was a great. Thanks, Jeff, who's not in the room, for that question. You can be Olga, or you can be James. Take your pick.
Is Agile exclusive to only software development? If not, where else or what new areas can it be utilised in?
Yes, based on the principle we just discussed a minute ago, it can apply everywhere. It's about being customer focused, delivering value, delivering in small batches, learning, early feedback, and doing it again for the next phase, and adjusting the priorities. So it cannot just, it can work for change, it can work for project, it can work for everything. The best example is probably ING, which implemented a full Agile head office in Netherlands. Their entire organization is organized in Agile with cross-functional teams, which works, I believe, very well. And actually, in HSBC, we're going to pilot that in France later in this year. We're going to take the retail bank head office as well and turn it into a complete Agile organization, working cross-functional teams only, for both the change and the more BAU stuff. So we'll see how it works, but I'm pretty sure it will deliver lots of value. Yeah. So there's no limitation to Agile. The key principle apply to everything. There is a key rule as well. There is not one Agile. Agile is a key word, but it has to be relevant for what we're doing. So if we, depending on the detailed activity, we can adjust the way we do it, but the key principle can still be valid. Yeah.
Excellent. Annie, you're working quite closely with HR at the moment and undergoing a transformation. Have you got a perspective from that viewpoint?
The implementation, if you start from scratch, if you start cold, you actually have to be very careful with how you deliver the message and the language you adopt to non-IT people. So you try to cut out as much IT lingo as possible and really try to find the equivalent that is the same but for non-IT. You have to go completely to basics with explaining how it works, the values, the principles. And also the beauty of this is that you can get many, many variations of good practices and just have little experiments. And once people see the value, once they start thinking from waterfall to, oh, I can actually get a little bit some out of it in a couple of weeks' time, and some more, and later some more. So they really buy into this. And once you show them the value, they don't go back. They like it. They say that, with my case, they say that the implementation of Agile ways of working saved them 30% of their daytime now. So they're very happy about it.
Obviously, the foundations of Agile were in software, and there's all that kind of legacy, if you like, with Agile and being a software delivery methodology. And I think I suspect the question has come from can I apply sprints and stand-ups to non-software projects because of that, the origins basically. And I think it's less about, like I said before in the previous answer, it's less about the ceremonies and more about the culture and the change and communicating what you're trying to achieve, retrospecting regularly, measuring value. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's unfortunate that software was the first, the foundation, because it will always be associated with, and obviously a lot of the application is in software, but I don't think it ends there for sure.
No, I mean, if you look at the manifesto and you look at the theory that was born out of the birth of Agile, it does talk a lot about shipping of code because of where it was born from. It was born from a group of software developers on a mountain in Colorado. But actually, you can just replace the word code with any word that's appropriate for your area or your business, whether that be value, whether that be product, or anything else, whether that be policy or HR guidance. You can just replace the IT words with something else, and it's just as applicable.
Small challenge sometimes is to define your product, because when you put, this is what we're going to do, and now it's to you, and the question is, but what is our product? Okay, so what's the biggest problem you're trying to solve out here? Oh, the biggest problem is, for example, in HR, attrition. Okay, so what does attrition look like? And then you break it down, and then step by step, and this is how you arrive. Oh, our product is keeping people on board, for example. Not necessarily that's their problem at the moment, I'm not saying that, but just in case. Yes, I think it's main HR, one of the key HR problems. Yeah.
I should also say that I think sometimes the mistake is when companies apply Agile to things that just don't fit Agile. Yeah. Hardware and data center work. It's very difficult to shard a server or whatever. It will take a certain amount of time to install. And there's an obsession with being Agile. You can be Agile in doing that. Maybe you can do things in a more sort of iterative way, but not. You don't have to have a weekly sprint to install a set of servers, for example. It may take longer.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I'm a big advocate, and I'd say, from a ways of working and how you approach your work and how you get organised and how you actually sort of speed up the work that you do, it's got universal applicability. However, sort of once you get into some of the details, and to your example, not everything is always suitable, and we shouldn't. It's quite tempting to see the benefits of working with Agile from a software delivery perspective. But when we work with technology, it's bits and bytes, and generally sort of we can manage that fairly easily because it's a known quantity. And what we're starting to find actually is we extend Agile out into lots of different change. Some of the change that we deliver is a lot more uncertain, especially around people. And therefore it's very difficult for us to, say, create user stories in the same way that we would for technical user stories. For those that are, people change related, for example, or where there's a high level of uncertainty or variables which we can't manage and control, unfortunately. We're going through this process at the moment of looking at understanding how do we survey our customers, for example. And the temptation is to put those into Agile teams and run ahead. But actually, these guys know what they're doing already. And so they do it 100 times. It's their BAU. They're quite happy with the work they have to do. So the other element to this is it is universally applicable from a way of working, I think, but actually there's a risk to introducing it, and actually that risk may not sort of outweigh the benefit of keeping people doing what they do if that is yielding results. So a little bit of caution maybe in terms of how we approach this.
So to support a smoother transition to Agile, which types of projects should be prioritized?
Should be what, sorry?
Should be prioritized, should be selected.
I would recommend to take a pilot project, which is maybe not the highest priority of business, and to try to apply principles, to try to apply methodologies that is going, and to see how it goes. So I would say you need to select a project that you would like to treat as experiment. It's something that you really, something that is not highest priority for you.
Yeah. Yes, and personally, my first criteria will be the maturity of the team working on it. Are they agile in their, do they have the mindset? Are they mature enough to work in an agile way? So if you want to start somewhere and prove it works, take the people who are ready to make it work, and then you can roll out to the other projects later on. Yeah.
I have two teams, one very different in terms of maturity and a willingness to have sprints and stand-ups and things like that. So I think you have to gauge what the maturity of the team is and what the personalities are, and then see if you can see how hard you can push the agile kind of theory. Obviously, the closer you are to the theory, theoretically you're going to be more successful. But in my first team, we're just very, very against. Even standing up for 5 minutes, talking to each other was a bit of a challenge. And they did. So I had to sort of read the room, if you like, and then try and get them to come to the sprint mentality and ordering stories by value and priority without saying, right, we're going to do a backlog planning session as such, and then we're going to have a sprint at 3 o'clock, stand up at 3 o'clock every day. So I wouldn't have picked that team for the sort of pilot project because I think they were just, their focus was writing code and sitting at the desk and getting stuff. Whereas the other team's completely the opposite. I could see straight away much more mature in terms of their experience with Agile and willingness to take on new ways of doing things. So people are probably the biggest factor, really.
It might be easier to answer this question of what not to prioritise rather than what to prioritise. So for me, anything that you are trying to hit a deadline that's fixed and immovable and, shall we say, forced upon you, whether that be from within the organisation or, say, from a regulator, tends to not work well as something that you would prioritise to try Agile for the first time. What does work well, though, is kind of what's been said already. Something that's not high pressure, but also something where you can take that thing that you want to deliver and slice it into increments that you can deliver and drive value in incremental steps. Because one of the key things you want to be able to prove to yourself is that you can deliver something, take a step back, look at what went well, what went wrong, and then improve for the next increment. So the doing a retrospective, to quote the theory, is an important part of the process of adopting an agile way of working, and it's one of the key ceremonies that you want to be practicing on a regular basis. Otherwise, you'll just keep doing the same thing over and over again and not know whether it's the right thing or not.
Excellent, thanks. So we're going to move on with the questions. Have we got? Well, I know we've got Andrew Ahoy in the room. Andrew, are you okay to ask your question?
So to really adopt Agile in a large and complex organisation, what is the key ingredient that you have to have in place or make sure happens to give the organisation the best chance of success?
Firstly, the people, the mindset, starting from the leadership. If you don't have a leadership who's ready to accept Agile, it will not work. And so you need really to get the leadership team with you and then the rest of the organization. And if you want to be truly Agile, there are lots of stakeholders who need to be involved. So first is to get the right mindset of the organization. We have experiences where in some places we do agile work which deliver lots of value, and in some other places where it doesn't deliver any value because it doesn't go live, because the leadership is not ready to go by small increments. In that case, that's a waste of time, right? So you need to prove step by step that it creates value, and over time you convince the entire teams, the entire leadership to extend Agile progressively. So that's one of the key factors. The second one is to accept that, linked to that, you won't have the entire organization Agile on day one. So you might have to work on some parts in an Agile way, but maybe the end-to-end will not be fully Agile. Maybe when you'll go and test, maybe the testing the testing part will be less Agile than some others. You have to accept that. So you need to remain flexible and try to accommodate all these constraints. And over time, you develop the agility of the entire organization, but it won't happen in day one. Yeah.
To add to this is the cultural change. So loads of organizations, when they're trying to jump into huge, big agile transformation, they really are falling flat on their face, not taking enough care of cultural change. And this starts with the C-suite, as you said that. So there's an industry report that is published annually that says that agile problems, and year by year, for the many years now, the biggest problem is that cultural change is not supporting agile values. So that is the biggest problem of agile adaptation that you can face. And as a leader or leadership of the company, this is the first primarily thing you need to focus on before even you consider the agile transformation as it is.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, culture. I'd like to add one example. It's not HSBC, it's not the previous example I gave. That's another bank who tried in one country to turn the organization into agile. They hired coaches. The coaches left after 2 years, and some people quickly returned to their good old ways. So when we talk about culture, mindset, and so on, it's a big work, right? So it's not something. It's not something that you have coaches for 6 months, or in this example, 2 years, and it's done forever. It's a constant work, so that it gets fully embedded in all the mindset from the entire organization. So it takes time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd add a few points to what has just been made. Actually, we talked a little bit about sort of applicability in non-IT environments, which is an interesting statement in itself. Because actually, when we've looked at how do we become more agile in HSBC, for example, the conclusion is actually we need the whole organization to be actually more agile, full stop. So there's no point trying to do it in IT and the rest of the organization not adapting itself to support that. And there's a few really important points. Is if you start it in IT and you try and push it back into the organization, it'll almost certainly fail. But by the same token, sort of change the rest of the organization, it's a huge thing. And actually rocking up and saying, right, we're all going to be agile is not really a recipe for success. You actually have to let the organization really get ready itself and actually answer its own questions in terms of how does it actually start to focus more on customers, to increase sort of the throughput of change that we deliver and the velocity. And that really creates the right environment, the right conditions for you to have those sort of senior executive and stakeholder conversations about how do you pivot the entire organization. And Agile is really key because it's all about collaboration and working together, and you will only work at the speed of your slowest component almost. And if that's the decision making in the business, for example, or if that is the engagement of a product owner, then you're not going to be very agile, so you're only going to achieve limited success. So it's not an easy answer, Andrea. Let me throw it back to you though, from your perspective, because you're sort of sat within our risk function looking at Agile. What perspectives and what insights have you got from trying to pivot that organisation to Agile?
I think the key thing, and really back to what Philippe was saying, is around the leadership. I think a lot of the work that you can do relatively easily is around educating people, giving them an understanding. But if there isn't the buy-in that people are going to do things differently, sometimes they're going to fail. I think it really is a challenge for us to really buy into the idea that we want to become truly agile. People's expectations of us have to change at the same time as our ability to deliver in a different way.
Can I add to this something? Sometimes organizations go in with their goal as being agile. But what they forget, that agile equivalent is better. So what can we do better? And sometimes they're trying to really do the ceremonies and really do everything that textbook tells you, completely losing the plot. So it's important to be on track with the C-suite, with the senior leadership, and to do this small value. Just always focus on the end goal and the value.
Totally agree, yeah.
It's difficult getting change done in HSBC, full stop, but trying to pivot to being more of an agile organisation is really difficult. I have lots of conversations with Andrew on this topic. And the agile coaches generally tend to say we need to have a burning platform, which is sort of traditional Kotter change type sort of approaches. The problem we've got as a large complex organisation, and lots of large complex organisations have, they're generally large and complex because they're pretty successful, and therefore you don't really have a burning platform which is forcing you to change. So that's also something, when we talk about actually an imperative to be more agile, but people are looking at the bottom line and, actually the figures are stacking up and everything's pretty good. That often will be a barrier that you need to overcome in the minds of sort of your senior stakeholders as well. So something else just to maybe to watch out for is that you're going to have to be quite convincing with a case for change for doing all of these things.
Which agile principles you can apply in your life, which is not work related, which you can use and make that change? Firstly, start with your personal life and after become more agile at work.
Wow. Right, so that's a great question. I think I'm going to open it up to the floor. Is anybody agile in their personal life?
Shaz has a Kanban board in his kitchen, I believe.
Yeah.
If you're agilist, you very often will have something on the wall saying "to do, in progress, done." Come to my place, you'll see it on my walls everywhere. Order groceries, done.
I do have a monthly sprint. Yeah, I do have a monthly keep note, and I have a backlog of things, and I prioritise the backlog.
What it gives you is actually a chance to step back and see how well you've done, what you planned, how much you've achieved personally, and if this was your goal. So you do apply agile principles in life all the time, but like how strict you're with them, it's another question.
Having young kids is a good way to be agile as well. You have no other choice but listening to them. You have to reprioritize constantly.
Compare kids with the stakeholders. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one are the easiest to manage, but
I mean, I'm just about to embark on a building. A builder's going to build something at my house, and one option is to let him do it for 6 months. The other option is to meet with him every week and see how it's going, and see if we can get more involved and things like that. I mean, it's the same. It's not we need to do a sprint planning session or anything, but I don't want to. We want to learn as we go on, right? It's just natural to move. So I think the point is, creating a path that, with inputs that you're learning along the way, rather than just going dark for a period.
Cool. I wouldn't say I've got much agility in my personal life, although my wife is quite keen on frequent retrospectives to see how well I did in the past period and what I could do well going forward. So excellent. We'll move swiftly on. We've got John Humphreys, not the John Humphreys, I think. So, how is effective governance in the area of risk management implemented on agile projects? I'm going to fire this over to Rob, because the risk profile and some of the stuff you do in Google must be quite high.
Every project we do when we're rolling out things to 2 billion users has to be, kosher in terms of privacy and security and all those kind of things. So those risks are the same on every single project. And then the way I manage them is the same as I would with a waterfall project. I mean, we have an iterative or agile way of doing the software, but I still have it's not sort of an old school risk register, but it's a way of managing risk proactively and almost in an agile way. Getting feedback from people around the business on the risk, updating the register or whatever it is I'm using. Still do status reports and get the awareness out there of that risk and manage it in the same way. So it's like a parallel traditional project management activity alongside the Agile delivery. It's probably slightly more agile in that I'm speaking to those teams regularly, and they're involved because of the agile nature of how we do things, but no different really.
It boils down to collaboration and transparency. The earlier notice you give of what you're going to deploy, the better they're prepared to test your change and say, yes, go for it. So talk to them constantly. Bake brownies, it helps. Go to talk to them. They prioritize you based on the amount of carbs you give them. That's a trick from the trade, right? So always works.
I mean, one thing I think, originally all the theories that you get everyone you need to deliver an increment in the stand-up, which, me trying to get a lawyer at every stand-up is impossible. So, I have a weekly meeting with our kind of privacy lawyer and go through what we're doing, and that, me and him can address a lot of the risks without the rest of the team, and then I can report back. It's not, otherwise I'm wasting 4 days of his, 4 stand-ups of his time, if you like. So that hasn't really changed for me.
You have to manage the risk, regardless of whether you're delivering in an agile way or not. I mean, to me, the risk requirement of whatever it is that you're doing is just a requirement. It's built into your user stories, it's built into your epics, it's part of your backlog. If it is an IT delivery and you are having to deal with data privacy as part of your IT delivery, they just become part of the requirements, and you would add them to your risk register. You would engage with your risk colleagues. I tend to agree, there's no way we can get our legal people there every day. We struggle to get them there every week, let alone every day. But it's engagement at the beginning, up front, making people aware we are going to need your help as part of this delivery, and keeping that line of communication open with them, making sure they understand how what you are proposing to deliver changes your risk landscape. Are you potentially making it worse? So are you increasing your residual risk, or actually are you going to make it better? And therefore they'll be much happier with you if you are. But I think you boil it down. Doing stuff agile doesn't mean that you don't manage risk.
And yeah, completely agree with all of that, but we're going to pilot something a bit further than that. So when I was saying we're doing a pilot at the end of this year where we'll turn the entire organization agile, we'll split this legal compliance team within the cross-functional teams. So rather than sitting on a different floor, they will sit with their business stakeholder every day, the whole day. We'll see how it works. Obviously, we'll have more reactivity from them and more business understanding. So from that point of view, it will work better. The risk we have is that it's much easier to say no when you sit on a different floor than when you sit with the business team during the day. So what we need to make sure is that the discipline from the risks team is not relaxed over time. So we'll try to govern that, and hopefully it will work. Yeah.
What we're also starting to see emerge sort of similar to that, and this example has come out of a different function, but it's related to compliance, and actually getting a greater level of collaboration over time between a particular team and the compliance function actually allows the team to grow their understanding and knowledge of compliance-related issues, and therefore make decisions a lot quicker. And actually, the compliance guys are actually quite happy about that because it's less intrusive into some of their core work that they do. And so this is all about sort of, growing the skills of the team to actually speed up delivery. I think sort of you made the point about sort of speed at the start as well. So actually by getting greater engagement and collaboration between different functions, there's a mutual benefit. It doesn't have to be that somebody's there making decisions all the time, but actually as people grow their skills and their understanding around a particular area, it allows them to make more informed decisions, which allows us to move at a better pace.
So Mary's question was, what are the common mistakes of failing to stay supple, agile in a fast-changing world? How to stay in the forefront of change rather than react to it?
Cultural change and empowering teams, and one of the first things I heard at Google was seek forgiveness, not permission. which has been really useful because, you know, I just use that with the team. I say, look, no one's going to tell us like what to do. We have to find a way of being agile, do the right product changes that we think the market and the data is telling us. And you know, we're not getting a mandate from a central PMO or anything. We're building our own process. And you have to, you know, with a company the size of Google, you can't roll out Agile in the same way in every team. I mean, every single team is doing it different, but we all have that cultural commonality, if you like, in that the teams know best in terms of what they should be doing, and the data tells us what the next project is and how well we're doing on the current one. So I think the way to stay supple is to just let empower teams as much as possible and let them define their own process and their own roadmap with some governance centrally and from the kind of powers that be. But you know, I often hear that, like, when, you know, I hear from like VPs that we don't know what we should be telling you. We know what we want to do as a business in 5 years, but you know, there's a million other teams out there. So define your own destiny, basically. And we, you know, I don't feel any pressure to succeed particularly. I'm trying to obviously succeed, but if I fail, it's not the end of the world.
And how does Google sort of integrate innovation with the Agile teams?
I think each team does it on their kind of, you know, take Gmail, for example. It's there'll be a portion of time that's part of any sort of sprint to look at, you know, moonshot ideas and crazy ways of doing things. There might be a day in a month where they're free to code and try something crazy. But Gmail's pretty, you know, it's pretty incumbent, and you know, it's like a standard project. So doing like 80% innovation on Gmail is kind of not the right balance, probably. Whereas trying to, you know, self-driving cars is all about innovation. So that's just a constant theme of the sprints, if you like. So different team, I think innovation is, you know, challenge the status quo is a big mandate, but I think depending on where your product is in the market, you have to tailor that kind of innovation accordingly.
Cool. Lana, do you have any perspectives?
Yeah, I can add something. In Secret Escape, what we're practicing, we have once a sprint, we have a hack day. We allow our teams to do completely different things, so they can work on their own projects. They can suggest to business what they think they can improve situation with any problems that we have in backlog or whatever. So we just listen our people, we just give them time, space, resources to experiment, and actually we have some really cool projects and things that we implemented, and it was thanks to this time that they spent in working on side projects.
This is what they're trying to do right now, my current client. They're really trying to incorporate this cultural change into how it can enable people better, what fun they can have, what other activities they can have, what other benefits company can offer them, so they feel empowered, happy, and delivering the value to their clients as well. So, yeah, so it's cultural change. I agree with this one.
What is the biggest challenge for banks regarding Agile, or what is the biggest challenge I guess for the organisations that you're working in terms of Agile?
We've talked about the cultural piece and the mind shift change from the top, and kind of endorsing the change from the leadership. But I think also it comes down to why. What's the reason? Why become an Agile organisation, and making sure you are doing that for the right reasons. So, and this is a personal opinion, so don't quote me. If your reason is, I want to do things faster and cheaper, then adopting Agile is not the thing to do. I think there's a misconception that Agile equals faster and cheaper. It doesn't. It equals providing value faster, but if your end goal is the same, it will still be delivered at the same time as if you were doing it waterfall. And for the same price, probably more expensive, to be honest. But what Agile does do is it gives you choice. It allows you to choose at any point along that journey whether you stop because you've delivered enough value, and that's good enough for your end user, your customer. And do you want to be Agile with a capital A or Agile with a little a? And those two things are very different. You know, Agile with a little a, I think, is just common sense. why would you not want to be, as any organisation, no matter how big or small, being agile with the little a, being collaborative, communicative, in partnership with each other, it just makes good business sense. But being agile with a capital A and following the theory doesn't always fit with all organisations.
Completely agree. I would say that the second one, and it comes back to a point we've made before, is in large organization is we can't get everybody agile at the same time. So it's understanding how we can how we can engage more and more teams over time so that they become truly agile as well, or they become agile as well, and so that we become more and more end-to-end agile. And that's not straightforward because all these teams report to different people who are and it takes time.
I've done the merger from e-commerce organization to bank, and the first thing that that you see, I'm not talking about HSBC. I had the privilege working for other banks, not HSBC. Disclaimer. That the projects get sometimes just almost unlimited funding, so project timelines. It's accepted that you can run over the project, it's okay. In e-commerce organization, it wouldn't probably happen on such a large scale because there's a very strict sort of budgeting constraints there as well sometimes. But also, they are more driven by value that they deliver to customers. So they talk to their customers, my observation, quite a lot, like extensively. So our next move, customer, what do you want? And they do quite extensive customer researches as well. And whatever they deliver on the website is heavily driven by what the customer voice says. My experience with finance organizations, they tend to make decisions quite a lot for customers. So they believe that this is the next product is what's going to hit it big, and this is what customers want. And I've noticed some lack of some research in some areas in this perspective. So. Not HSBC, not had the pleasure to work for you guys yet, but just saying.
Actually, I visited HMRC a year ago, or 18 months ago. Every single developer in the digital center has to spend half a day every 6 weeks with customers. Could be customer interview, customer observation. HMRC would say may not be the most customer-focused organization, but the digital team is really, every 6 weeks, half a day with customers. Calling to interview, testing with them, but talking to customer. I thought it was fantastic. It's difficult to implement, but I love the idea.
I can speak about HSBC because that's really all my experience. I would say that we've got some sort of key challenges. So technical debt to sort of, speed up how we deliver change is a key issue, and we won't be unique amongst our competitors. And so, lots of complexity in our back ends. We've been an acquiring bank, and we've plugged systems together and wired things, which makes it very difficult then to be agile in some of our delivery. But as well as technical debt, I'd say we've got a lot of organisational debt in the organisation. And what I mean by that is that we are a large, complex organisation, and we've been organised into functional silos, often for very good reasons, for driving efficiencies. We have lots of shared services. Even within technology teams, we have lots of shared services who are supporting multiple businesses and services. And that all drives away from agility. And so when we talk about being end-to-end agile, we often then hit barriers, and we often see quite a few challenges where we try and work across silos in an agile way. It just doesn't kind of work because you've always got those handoffs, you've always got those splits of responsibility, you've always got a level of ambiguity and miscommunication happening across those teams. So as a large bank, I think one of our largest challenges is how we've been organised over the past 152 years, I should add. So we have a lot of sort of heritage in terms of how we're organised, and we're quite bureaucratic and risk averse as well. That's one of our other challenges that we are going to have to overcome with a sort of big mindset change. And I think the point is that not that we can't get that, it's just it will take time. And I think most large banks it will take time. So an interesting emerging space. for ourselves and our competitors.
I guess thinking about this with a analysis flavour in terms of requirements, with the required process and governance for changes, how can Agile help a bank like HSBC be able to deliver small, quick, incremental value to the market?
Do you work for HSBC, by the way?
Yes.
You do? Okay. So you have I'm assuming you have some insight into our current governance, right?
Yeah, I've only been here 3 months.
Oh, okay. Okay. To be completely brutally honest, change the governance and the process. Why not? It's our process. We control it. Why can't we change it to make it work better in an agile world? And actually, Ian's right. So this is very topical at the moment, and it's actually something that Philippe, with his team and my team, have been discussing and working on, in how we can change a process and a governance framework that was fit for purpose in a traditional way of delivering change into something that is much more empowering, drives better accountability, but is flexible so that you can drive the most amount of value for your customers, whether they be customers in the organisation or customers out on the street, right? And that pivot starts with worrying less about the lower level detail and the money that goes against that, and focusing more on the value and the outcomes that you are trying to deliver and achieve. And if you spend more time focusing governance and process on the value, then naturally the other things will follow. But certainly, challenge the status quo, as Rob said earlier. It's within our gift to do that.
Yes, I'm just realizing we haven't mentioned something critical yet. Product owner. In terms of challenges for a big organization, in terms of how we deliver value incrementally and so on, the product owner is absolutely critical to that. He's at the center of it. He's the guy to whom the top management will delegate the day-to-day decisions. They need to trust this person to do the right decisions, to deliver the value and make the most of the investments. And that's quite of a challenge, right? To find the right people, the right product owner, for the senior management to delegate to them and not to be comfortable not to be aware of every single decision. So yes, the product owner funding is absolutely critical, and I think that there is in many organizations it's really a gap.
Excellent. It's a big issue in our organisation, like it probably is in lots of finding that balance. I think we are coming to the conclusion that empowerment of the right individuals and lowering of governance down to the appropriate level. There's a great saying, I think, sort of in some of the courses, sort of lower the decision making to where the information is. And often we see our governance processes requiring an awful lot of information to be floating up to the decision makers, whereas actually if we actually load the governance down to where the action happens, you can increase agility and throughput.
And I think the point you made about seeking forgiveness, not sure it would work in terms of as much in sort of a banking regulated environment, potentially, but that would be the ideal way to do it, right, to some extent.
I mean, we do, there are checks. Like we have a very lightweight kickoff process to every project that makes the awareness across the business known for what you're doing. But it's like it would take security point of contact 5 minutes to see what we're doing and then give the green light to carry on, so we're not wasting loads of resource on something that's not going to be acceptable later on. Then we keep them in the loop through the project, and then at the end, before we launch, they get the final. So it's like, and it works really well, to be honest. It's like you enter your project, you tick all, it automatically picks the teams that need to know about your projects, you submit, and then then it goes out to the masses, and then, as a program manager, I'm the point of contact for questions and kind of removing blockers, or cancelling the project if it gets to that point.
just out of curiosity, what technology do you use to? It sounds like a
Oh,
great
like everything
idea.
else, we are proprietary, internally built. Something that somebody built 15 years ago, and it's now probably slowly turning into a production tool that will add to the cloud suite or something. Yeah, most things are built by people in their spare time, to be honest.
Is the presence of a portfolio management department an indication of low agile maturity?
I'm going to fire that back to Rob in the first instance. I'll be very interested to sort of know what investment you make in portfolio management at Google.
So I'm in Android at the moment. I can only really speak for what we do in Android. That's 5,000 people and many teams, but we have what we call a release team, which is essentially a portfolio management team, and they manage all of the features that the teams are doing in terms of making sure other teams are aware of them, that the scope for every Android release is clear, and that projects, we're doing the right projects basically. So I think it's actually the opposite of what the question is actually. I think if you can have agility and then have a portfolio layer on top of the agility, then you have the best of both worlds really. Obviously portfolio typically it kind of gives the indication that you have a waterfall kind of central office giving approvals for all the projects, but for us it's bottom up, so the portfolio is really the go-to office for what we're doing, not the steer for what we should be doing.
Are you thinking this from a sort of traditional PMO, governance support, reporting, sort of control perspective, or I think
that's a very interesting point about its role might change in the future, because rather than be, we decide what you will do and we govern whether you're allowed to do it and we report to your stakeholders, the coordination role, are we doing sensible things? In a global bank, maybe, you might be worried about multiple releases going into a market at the same time. There's lots of roles of coordination I think need to happen, but maybe it's a different role than the traditional PMO as the governor, the controller, the dictatorial type of style, and you can't do this unless you pass certain gates and stuff. Empower your teams, but somebody still needs to coordinate it. It seems to me a sensible thing.
Agile is as well to delegate, right, by definition. So you give money to a team. Obviously, you want to know if they're delivering any value with it. And so you need some portfolio management for that to understand the value and to understand if the next period you give them more money or less. And
One of the challenging things, though, is should the team not make its own decisions? Am I delivering value or not? And therefore, I should cut my project or not. It shouldn't need it.
Yeah, it's in an ideal world. Yeah, in ideal world, completely agree. After that,
but it would take a while to get there, maybe.
If you're not delivering any value and you might lose your job, you might not raise your hand, right? So, so you better check on that. In a world where investments are not meeting. Yeah, we never have enough investments to meet the demand, right? So we need to allocate it the best way. For that, we need to make sure we do something with it.
I have seen that. I must admit, I've found it surprising. I'm relatively new to this organisation, but I've noticed that people will do things even if they don't deliver value to protect their roles. And I've seen that more than perhaps in other small businesses I've worked in, where you can't afford to do that. So that sort of being on the coal face that happens in smaller businesses, if you all behaved as though you're just keeping your job and aren't delivering value, you wouldn't all have a job. So I think as the nature of a large organisation, there's more risk of people protecting their roles and covering things.
Yeah. And I've seen too many people celebrating launching stuff, not creating any value, but launching something. And that's not what we're here for. So, yes.
PMO probably is the most difficult to get the agile thinking and mentality into. So it's alignment of processes, it's alignment of thinking, it's alignment of looking ahead and getting feedback that may matter.
Yeah, and landings, not launches. That's the mentality.
Yes. Certainly, as you sort of scale Agile, I'm not talking about scaled Agile, but as you scale Agile in an organisation, you get more teams doing it. Sort of understanding the coordination, the dependencies, some of the stuff that Rob talked about, the flow of work into those teams as well, because actually you want to have a level of consistency of work going in there, and strategic alignment as well. So bottom up's great, but actually, are we doing the changes which are strategically aligned? So I definitely see a role for it in the future. I don't see it as a traditional PMO like we've got in a sort of project program world. It needs to pivot, but understanding the investments and how they're meeting the outcomes and delivering value across a business line is absolutely imperative, I think. So.
Yeah, I should say that the themes are set by the portfolio team. So we get themes, and then you have the empowerment of the teams to align with the themes, and the themes come from the company strategy and what we need to do externally. Privacy is a massive one at the moment. So if we're working on things that aren't aligned with the privacy theme, they can be whatever we decide. Then we might get questions on why we're doing stuff, basically.
It's like so much of what we're dealing with in HSBC is an evolution of roles, especially in the change environment. We have a number of traditional roles, and I think the temptation is to say we're going to go from A to B, when actually we have good change professionals in the organisation. And actually the equation is the same. We start with an idea and we end up with something that we are landing to customers, hopefully, in a successful way. And that doesn't change regardless of actually whether you're agile or you're non-agile or you're doing waterfall or whatever. So actually we are going through this transition at the moment in the evolution of roles, but we're all experienced change people. We didn't come into work and decide to do waterfall one day. It's sort of a cultural thing, I think. So this is a transition.
How do you actually do work while having all these ceremonies? Because that's a really tough one for me.
It's a great question. We are going to have a retro at the end of this, by the way, that you're all invited to.
So I have another question, do we have really a lot of ceremonies? All projects that we have in Secret Escapes, they are run with Scrum, and there is only 4 mandatory ceremonies in Scrum, and when we are doing them properly, we don't really have a need for another ceremonies. But I can agree that due to the nature of work, a lot of uncertainty, we need to have maybe complementary ceremonies which can complement basic ceremonies. What we are doing actually, we have agreement with the team how to schedule these ceremonies with the less possible distraction, so how we can create how much the most possible focus time for teams. So on top of just 4 mandatory ceremonies, what we are doing, we have weekly backlog refinements, which can be scheduled, for example, straight after stand-up, straight after lunch, or just before you go home. And all these intervals, something that you can use this focus time actually for producing code for deliver to actually like this. So to be honest, from my opinion, I think we don't have lots of ceremonies in Agile.
I'm trying to do the vision, the customer vision, trying to keep up with the customer research, getting data, keeping the stakeholders happy, and then I have to break away, attend a daily stand-up, and then try to keep the C-suite happy, tell them, give them updates on how we're spending their money, and then you've got another sprint planning session, then you've got a retrospective, and it's just I think in our role we kind of take the whole Agile principles and theories, to the fullest. So we don't probably tailor it, as I think
and
the panellists
what's
said.
Your role? What's your role?
Product manager.
Right.
So we probably don't tailor it to our needs, rather than we just kind of, here's the Agile methodology. You've got to do this, this.
What I hear is the value. So the value here needs to be realized of the events and how effective events are. So they've been stopped being called ceremonies for a couple of years now. The Scrum Guide decided that events is a better name for those. If you go back to your Scrum Master, your Agile coach, just talk to them about this and just see how they can help you to realize more, get more value out of this. After these events like this. So obviously you're a product manager, you would be talking to stakeholders, talking to those who are in charge of the project. How do you get their opinion and how do you incorporate this into what you do? So how do you represent them at these events? That's important. So, and yes, it's time consuming, but what I hear, there's probably not value is realized, and it needs to be a little bit more like transparent why you're doing this. So go back to your Agile coach and Scrum Master and ask, start with whys of the ceremonies, yeah.
I think it's a great question. So I have immense pressure to try and limit the amount of meetings and keep people focused for sprint planning. I mean, we do sprint planning in 20 minutes, because I need to basically keep the people engaged, get them back to their machines as quickly as possible. A lot of prep before the meeting itself. Retrospectives will be like every 4 or 5 weeks, perhaps. And in the retrospective, it's like we have a stopwatch, we have a phone on the table, 10 minutes for what went well. They're finished in 40 minutes. So it's like, I feel the pressure of keep. But and also I think it's the detrimental to the kind of Agile, trying to roll out Agile. If you're keeping people in meeting rooms for too long, it's burning away at that credit that you're trying to get with the team. So as much prep before the meetings as possible, and then just try and keep it, short and sweet. That's the approach I take.
We see a lot of instances where daily stand-ups are not really daily stand-ups, and they run for half an hour with 30 people. Our sprint plannings, people don't take a sort of, the inputs in and go through them in the right way, and the outputs aren't clearly understood and signed up to, and so we see, and maybe that's just a transitionary state as people are starting to get interested and starting to want to do this. But generally, we sort of see that it's around the organisation. If you don't organise properly for doing these things well, you'll end up with lots and lots of invitations to lots and lots of different ceremonies, and you find yourself, I need to go to this, and this. And quite often it's because you're moving into a little bit of a world of uncertainty with all of this, and then people like to go to meetings to find out what's going on, and that's not really the right way to do things. It's not adding value. In fact, we stopped a meeting this week because halfway through and we said, look, this is not the right way to run this meeting. We're not being respectful of people's time. And so we should take a reset on this. So I would always encourage you to sort of take a critical view of this and actually judge the value it's adding to you and judge the value that it's adding to the people who are attending. And if it's not adding the appropriate value, revisit it.
And remember, Scrum is a framework, so you can experiment within the limits of framework as much as you want to. So.
And what I have found from my experience, it's something like if we arrange information radiators, if we visualize some things, it's completely reduced the need to have a meeting, because people can go, for example, to a portfolio wall and figure out the status, what they need. So -1 status meeting. So it's something, definitely how you will tailor the framework to your needs. Rather than mechanically go to meetings that you have in your calendar, ask yourself, what is the purpose of this meeting? Do we really need to have all these people in this room? Or maybe I just can go and have a chat with one person and I will completely satisfy my needs, information or whatever. So I think, be mindful and just make sure you get value and you have a purpose behind each meeting or each ceremony, rather than for the sake of ceremony to have it.
Yeah, just from the perspective of me just being new to Agile, being new to the Scrum Master role, what's sort of one thing you would wish you'd done less of, or maybe perhaps more of, when first starting out in your roles?
From my experience, when I was a Scrum Master, shield your team better. So do you help them not to be interfered every 5 minutes? So, and have the business have respect for the process of a Scrum and be this process guardian a little bit more. Have confidence.
Yeah, I think what we've done, we could have accelerated. We started to coach and train the transformation teams. Once we were comfortable on them understanding Agile, we started to train and coach the business teams and the senior stakeholders. Honestly, I think we should have gone more quickly, and there was no need to do it in 2 steps. The rationale was we wanted the transformation teams to be able to deliver on Agile before we were overselling it to the leadership teams. But actually, we could have done in parallel. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be cheeky and go for 2, if that's all right. So, less isolation. So, trying to be agile on our own. So, I'm thinking about when I was in technology. We tried to adopt Agile, but we tried to do it by ourselves. And we didn't bring our business partners along on the journey, and then wondered why wasn't this working? Well, because your customer's not working in the same room as you. And more of investing in the tooling around collaboration and to your point at the back, it wasn't until we invested in collaborative tools did we really start to motor and take the pressure off having to meet every day and talk every day, because we were using the right collaboration tools. We just did it through the tool.
Cool. Lana?
Okay. I would say more experiments, more trying things, rather than just following what processes you already have.
Excellent. And Rob?
More focus on the principles, not the theory. So, don't feel forced to do sprints and even don't call things sprints and backlogs and missions and all that kind of stuff. That's the one thing I learned from when I started at Google. I kind of went in there and I was the Agile person and I gave it the whole 10 yards with Agile and sprints and stuff. And now I never refer to any of those terminologies.
Agile in disguise.
Yeah. Yeah, so people, I say, well, it sounds like a bit of a sprint. Maybe we can, sounds like a good idea, but it's come from a team. I don't set up sprint planning sessions. I set up weekly goals or something, some kind of other obscure way of a sprint, basically.
Is there anybody who's got a burning question that they can't possibly leave tonight unless they've got the answer to?
I work in cybersecurity, information security, and data protection, and so my question is, how do you foresee AI ethics working together with Agile in an Agile fashion if a machine cannot have the same objective thinking as a human being would be in an Agile fashion? Or is that a question by the look on your face that perhaps I shouldn't have asked?
Right, so I can see everybody...
Because it's at the forefront of where
Yeah.
we're going, right, in
Yeah.
technology, but we also need to bring the ethics into it, the human factor into it. And I think it's quite important, but how do we mesh that with Agile and short iterations and thinking about the conclusions that we've reached, but a machine is not a human?
It's a great question, I guess. It's one way to describe it. I'm going to come back to you though and get your views on it, because you've probably been thinking about this quite a lot, I guess. Perhaps?
It's a great question. We're doing a lot, obviously trying to do a lot with AI in an ethical way, but I think the teams I've seen doing that have the people, like the lawyers and the privacy people, almost within the sprint. So it's not where I said earlier we meet them once a week, they're actually meeting them daily. They're part of the team. Because, if they start going too far down a road and start doing too much with data, it gets a little bit dicey. So they're actually part of the Scrum team, really. The people that know what the right thing to do. I mean, engineers can do some crazy things. So it's how do we keep a close check on that? And even a weekly check on that kind of stuff is probably too infrequent. So we're planting the people that know in the teams.
I think, sorry, maybe I don't have an answer, but maybe a bit of a clarification in your question. So are you thinking about AI as part of the change process? So using AI I'll use an IT, to write and deliver code? Or are you thinking about AI as the product that gets delivered and the ethics related to that?
When AI has to make the decisions that a human would normally make with an ethical standpoint. So now, if we are rolling out a project using AI to make some of those iterations in the projects, how do we bring in the ethical value to that going forward? Because we are using chatbots every day, and we are using, and this is where technology is going. But we need to be agile in the way that we are managing our projects as well. So it's that collaborative, transparent point of view. And how do we? I ask the question because it's fascinating to me, because this is where technology is going. So we're looking at a world where machines and AI are going, and robotics are going to take the forefront, but we also want to be agile in the way that we do this to maximize our output and maximize our efficiency and effectiveness of the product that we deliver at the end.
Yeah.
And how do we bring the ethics into that?
It's a very difficult question.
Sorry.
But it's I think it's a very interesting question when you think about the leaps you will need to take. So the easy way to answer is, well, there'll always be the human control. but you're not driving the maximum value if there's always human control. So if your goal is to allow AI to make decisions for you in an agile way, so should I invest here in this technology or should I invest in this technology, tell me which one or tell me how I should do change, you'll have an element of control in the beginning, but really your end goal is to not have that human element of control. You want to code and allow the AI, depending on which type of AI you're using, to get to a point where it's making the right decisions.
And then again, I think also to further what you've just said is also to decide, is it up to the AI to decide whether that sprint has been a successful sprint and whether we've actually gained value and where our challenges are, and therefore change its thinking in an ethical way in order to prioritize what we're going to release into the next sprint going forward, given that what we're going to introduce into the next situation from an agile point of view, to marry the two together.
I think it's a very brave group of people that would allow that at this point, I think.
I think it forms part of the wider discussion about whether robots are going to take over the world. Right?
I have an easier question though. It's the question of purpose. This new buzzword, purpose. Maybe that's one that's more appropriate for this forum. Is how you bring that into your agile environment. Is a direction of purpose, because that seems to be the latest buzzword. Anyway.
Yeah, I think we can probably touch on this really quickly. I mean, I'll kick it off. When I started looking at sort of agile from a business team perspective, very much about actually sort of the way that we work, and I'm a sort of big fan of Daniel Pink and Drive, and that talks about purpose, and it talks about autonomy and mastery as well. Agile brings all of those things. So having a purpose, I think, I've worked in lots of environments, I'm sure Lee has as well, where you've worked on multi-year projects and you have no idea really what you're delivering, and you've got no idea really when you're going to deliver it, and you get lost in the detail. Agile brings you a sense of purpose, because there's nothing more rewarding than actually seeing the fruits of your labour. Actually, being able to sort of see something that has gone live, has maybe gone live to customers, is very, very satisfying. So to me, that's one of the reasons that we should actually be moving towards more agile working across what we do. It's that speed delivery and the satisfaction. It's a human trait, right? That we sort of see. We do things to see value from them. So to me, that's sort of fairly key. Has anybody else got anything to throw into the mix? I'm getting the hurry on from the guys. So.
I would say the purpose of a company is supposed to be the promise you do to your customers, right? And Agile is about listening to your customers. So I think the two of them are completely interlinked. By being Agile, you deliver on the purpose.
A massive round of applause for our panelists this evening.